Hello. I think it's too late to say good morning, but welcome to everybody. I'm speaking here with regards on the results of the cocoa barometer, which was already mentioned. I'm one of the authors of the cocoa barometer together with Anthony Fontaine, but I'm also a member of the Voice Network, who is behind the cocoa barometer. And I'm on the board of the German initiative of sustainable cocoa. I'm a board member for the NGOs in this stakeholder forum. Cocoa, we try to connect the debate on living wage and living income to the cocoa sector because since a few years people are trying to find a definition what sustainability means for farmers. I found a very simple definition in a song from the 1950s in Ghana, where the text, you can see it. If you want to send your children to school, it's cocoa. If you want to build your house, it's cocoa. If you want to marry, it's cocoa. Buy clothes, cocoa. Buy a lorry, it's cocoa. Whatever you want to do in this world, it's cocoa money that you do it. If the cocoa business would still be like that, and cocoa would still make farmers wealthy, we wouldn't have a discussion about the living income and about sustainability and poverty and child labor. So cocoa made a way downwards for the farmers from a source of wealth, and it ended now in a lot of conferences on how to improve the situation of farmers. When we discuss about living income, living wage debate, the first question of many people from the industry was, do we need that? And I would say, yes, we definitely need a debate about decent income in the cocoa sector. We have a lot of projects going on since more than a decade now. Companies are spending a lot of money to improve the situation of farmers, and the results are very low at the moment. A week ago, we had a conference in Ghana and asked farmers from different countries, did your situation improve in the next 5 years? And the results were very mixed. So a lot of things are going on the ground, but we don't have a benchmark on how to measure projects and how to define what sustainability for farmers means. And for farmers, sustainability is closely connected to a decent income. The debate about a decent income is a development from a decent wage debate. We have since a couple of years a debate about a decent wage worldwide, and this is a debate which is much easier than a debate on a living income, because you have a worker, the worker gets a wage, and then you have to define what he has to buy from his wage, which includes food, water, housing, education, and so on, plus the possibility to set aside some money for unexpected events like health crisis. And we have an ongoing debate of the Asia floor wage campaign, for example, in the clothing sector, but also in electronics at the moment. We have these debates of ISEAL, GIZ, Ethical Tea Partnership, Banana Forum, Cotton Made in Africa, and so on. Plus we have a debate now of all the standard organizations, again including ISEAL, on how to define a living wage for all the certified products. To calculate a living wage, like I said, it's pretty easy. You go and look what's the income of a worker, you look at the wage rate, you look at the consumption, and then you have to define how many household mouths should be fed by such a wage. The Asia floor wage campaign is talking about 3 consumption units per household. In West Africa, the situation in the households is different. The families are much bigger. And then you have to look, is wage enough to feed these people? The Volkswagen Group, for example, which is in the headlines now for other reasons, they calculate a living wage for every own factory they have worldwide. They look what's the national minimum wage, what is the lowest tariff wage agreed by the unions, and then they look at this. Is this a living wage for a family of 4 people? And if not, they go higher with their own wage than the national minimum wage. So it is common practice in some companies, and it depends strongly on the negotiation power of the workers. If we come to a living income, situation is much more complicated, because we all know that income is earned by families of farmers. They have different sources of income, and it applies here to entrepreneurs and not to workers. Very similar is what we need for living, food, water, and so on, and money for unexpected events. Again, we have an ongoing debate now since 2 or 3 years, especially by this GIZ ISIL Sustainable Food Lab effort to define a living wage and living income, but also standard bodies are discussing a living wage and a living income nowadays. The problem is that you have a lot of certified products on the markets, and if you go down to the families, they are still poor. They're still living in poverty, and this is not what customers expect when they buy labeled products. We have also a debate on how to calculate the living income, which, like I already said, is much more complicated than the living wage, because volume and prices of harvests are changing. We discussed this morning, and sometimes, like in Ghana, nobody knows why the volume goes down, and prices are often coupled to exchange rate changes and so on. Another factor is the available workforce, labor units at a farm. It's normally you calculate for wage, one worker, you have one wage. Here you have family labor often, and you have additionally labor costs as the higher labor. It's the available land, soil fertility, grain we discussed already this morning as a risk. You have the socio-economic conditions of the farmer, his knowledge about good agricultural practices and so on, plus infrastructure is a very important cost factor for farmers. If you live in a remote area and you have to deliver your cocoa, you won't get the world market price because of high transport costs. Consumption, that's another thing which is harder to calculate than for a wage worker, because many cocoa producers, they produce their own food. If you calculate wages, usually you say 50% in third world countries a family needs to buy food. How much is it in a cocoa household? Farmers are in a very bad position to just discuss about a living income. They are not member of unions, they are price takers. They can increase volume and quality, and they can form cooperatives to strengthen their position, but they can also switch from one commodity to the next one. So if we go and try to define the living income, we have to look into the methodology. We have first try to find out what does a family need to survive. We have to determine how to calculate household incomes. It's not only cocoa, it's other crops. It can be small trade. It can be that farmers also work as wage workers for a part of a year. Then we have to do a calculation of the margins. We never talk about costs when we talk about cocoa production. I've seen very few figures on the costs to produce an average hectare, an average ton of cocoa. Last but not least, we have to make a gap analysis, and when we come back to the projects, if we find out, for example, that it's not possible at the price the farmer is getting at the moment for his different crops to make a sustainable life for his family, to have a living income, all the projects, companies, and development aid are running will fail. We can also certify poverty, which is something we experience in some areas. Farmers can influence their income in different ways. It depends, of course, on their entrepreneurship and their knowledge about agronomy. It's closely connected to good agricultural practices, but also to diversification. On our workshop 2 weeks ago, we met some farmers who produce all their food themselves. We have others who are dependent on buying most of their food. We had some farmers there who produced only cocoa. We had others who also produced rubber or palm oil. Increasing quality, that's a big question in the cocoa business, because it's often not rewarded with a higher price. If you have this, people in Africa, they have problems with that, to get a higher price for better quality. Increasing productivity could mean that you have an oversupply in the world market and a breakdown of the prices again, which happened around the year 2000. Scale of farms is also a question. Can a farmer survive on 1 hectare of cocoa? Does he need to survive on 1 hectare of cocoa? And if not, what's his alternative? Financial services, we always talk about credits, but another problem for many cocoa farmers is that they have no possibility to save money when the harvest is paid. So savings and credits have to be hand in hand. Form farmer groups could be a way for farmers to increase their power in the market, something which is happening at the moment. But we have also a responsibility here of the governments. They have to set a legal framework on the cocoa business, and they have to look on the development of market concentrations. They have 5.5 million farmers worldwide and only a handful of companies who control the business to trade beans or to process chocolate. This is a big power imbalance. We have, governments should reinvest part of the revenues from cocoa into cocoa producing regions. If you see, for example, the roads or schools or medical care facilities in some areas, you see that much more investment is needed than it is done at the moment, and this all influences indirectly the living income of a farmer. Inputs, availability of inputs. In Ghana, farmers told us that they have these cocoa pod approved chemicals, but they can also buy chemicals along the road, often with some Chinese inscriptions. They don't know exactly what's in it, but they buy it and they use it because they are cheaper. So good inputs have to be available. You need extension service for good agricultural practices and to support farmers to form groups. We need reliable data on the number of farmers and on the size of farms to calculate a living income. We tried something like that in the last cocoa barometer, and I must admit that the figures are often very shaky. What I did, because I did this calculation, I took all the public available reports on the situation of cocoa farmers, and then I had, for example, let's say 10 reports about the average size of a farm in Ivory Coast, another 10 of the average yield they had, but I had only one on the costs for farming. I had no data about the differences between a farm owner and a sharecropper. So it's only a rough calculation, and it doesn't say that they had 50 cents a day in Ivory Coast per farm, but per person on a farm, which is a very rough calculation. And you see, to reach the poverty line, we need to go a long way. We have two other inputs which are following now, which looked into more of these data, so I don't want to go too deep in it. I just want to say there is a huge problem to find out these figures. These figures are not available or not counted at all. And my question is, how do you want to make a project for cocoa farmers, and how do you want to have a sustainable living for cocoa farmers if you don't have these figures? What we also tried to calculate in Ghana and Ivory Coast was what is needed, and of course you need a higher farm gate price. We discussed these difficulties here for farm gate price and, for example, cedi devaluation before, but a colleague of mine who recently made a study in Nicaragua and visited cooperative there, he found out that they get more than the double per ton than the farmers in Ghana and Ivory Coast get. So it's also because of quality, but there is a higher share of the world market price, which is partly because of cheaper transport costs and better trading systems of cocoa beans. But we should also discuss about the size of farms. If we double the size of farms, does it mean that they have higher profits, or do they have to hire more labor, which eats up most of the higher yields? We don't need for sure, and higher yields in theory, like we have it here, it could bring a large improvement for farmers. But again, the meeting 2 weeks ago in Ghana, a female farmer told me that at the moment in Ghana she pays for a seasonal laborer around 20 to 22 cedis a day, around 4 to 5 euros, and she said, I just can't afford it. So she's working with sharecroppers. It was in the Kumasi region, and normally a sharecropper gets a third of a harvest, but due to no rain in the last, or nearly no rain in the last 3 months, she said my next harvest will be a third of last year's in this specific region. So the sharecroppers will get a third of a normal harvest. can his family survive on that? What does it mean for price, for yields debates? This I won't go deeper into it. That was we tried out what's happening if you double farm size, if you double yields, if you double costs per hectare, and the astonishing thing was that even with a 5-hectare farm, if you have high input costs, it could mean that at a farm gate price of $1,000, you are earning nothing. This is just theory. We exchanged some figures. You can, I think we will share the presentations after the meeting, and you can just have a look at it, where we played a little bit around with figures. And to calculate what will really help a farmer to overcome poverty, we need to know much more. The open question, that's my final slide, is there a way forward to a decent income and a sustainable farming? Yes. What we have to do is we have to define a vision. We have to work on a strategy and set priorities. We have to choose a team to do the work. This is adapted from an article I read last week about from the president of the insurance company AXA. He was asked what politics should do when they have a problem like a refugee crisis. He said, we should do what companies do. This is define a vision, work on a strategy, set priorities, and choose a team to do the work. And I'm missing that in the cocoa sector. Companies are running many projects. We don't need much. We don't know much about the outcome. We don't know much about the income of the farmers. We need to know much more. Let me say 2 words or 2 sentences to what I heard from the panel here before. They were talking about palm oil. I wrote some studies on human rights abuses in the palm oil sector in Indonesia. And if the vision for cocoa is what happened in Indonesia, it is a very bad vision in my eyes. But if we copy in the cocoa sector what we did for environmental reasons and also for what's happening with the people there, if you copy the palm oil sector, this is not a way out of the crisis in the cocoa business towards a decent income for all the people involved. And to a sustainable cocoa sector. I developed that together with Anthony Fontaine, who couldn't be here, and I hope it will be on the website of the ICCO, and many of the figures are on the website of the Cocoa Barometer. Thanks.